Okay. Muchas gracias, Mar. Hola a todos y muchas gracias por permitirme hablar en inglés. Many thanks for letting me speak in English. I do appreciate that. And thank you so much for letting me come to Granada and meet you here and have the chance for this discussion, which I really welcome. I want to understand the project in much more detail, and I want to talk data and findings and politics of findings with everybody. So many thanks. Okay, so a quick 10 minutes on the situation in the UK. Yeah? So I'm going to be talking about RSE, which is Relationships and Sex Education in the UK. This is our new label for it. Anything from a few years ago calls it sex and relationship education, but we don't like the sex going first, so we have to put the relationships first. And that's an important signal of the rest of the politics that will flow. We've tried to take the heat out of it, tried not to scare the horses is the phrase in English. I think here we mean not to scare the parents is possibly what we need, or the right-wing politicians. So I'm a member of the Sex Education Forum. I'm a core member of this body, and it's a national organisation that advises on sex education, does research, does policy, does a great big curriculum and resources. It's a fantastic organisation, and it has many members, not just academics like me. Mostly they are practitioners, so school nurses, school PSHE coordinators, school sex education teachers. So practitioners with the relevant experience, and we are of the view that the right thing is for a comprehensive sexualities education that is honest and frank and direct, that is inclusive of LGBT plus sexualities and bodies, that is also thoughtful about trans and non-binary genders, because that's a really big issue in schools today, a really big issue among young people, and is biologically detailed, factually detailed, without making assumptions about bodies, about sexual activities, or about health. Okay? So that's the starting point that I come from as well, and I'm very happy to be part of this organisation. So the title, I've just at the top put the titles now, RSE. In the policy document, the government policy document from 4 years ago now, it's also got health education combined. Okay, again, I think that's very science helpful. It uses science to be non-threatening, I think. And in the school curriculum, it fits in with personal, social, health and citizenship education. So we now have a really good policy. We have pretty good policy that used the advice that many of us had been providing research evidence for and lobbying for 20 years. The policy is okay. So legally, we're in a good situation. The policy is mandatory for schools. So all schools must deliver relationship education up to age 11, relationship and sex education from 11 to 18. Okay, so that is now mandatory, and that's taken a long time to get that in place. Just for the last 3 years, it's been mandatory. However, in COVID, schools were not teaching even mathematics, so of course there was no chance for RSE. So very disappointing. Even in the best of conditions, though, I think the delivery is diverse, patchy, unpredictable even. So, but the important thing is that in the last 2 years, schools have all created a curriculum. They have all told the government body when in the school year they'll teach it. And they have started to recognise that they need teachers who are qualified in PSHE or RSE. Another point that we've been making for many years. Okay. So we do have great resources on RSE from private organisations and from public bodies. So some of the health bodies, some of the NGOs, and some private little organisations, like one that one of my PhD students is running, is a website with brilliant advice for young people and curriculum packs for teachers, etc. So there are great resources. However, I think what happens in schools is very, very different. Okay, so I've said this. So legally, it's really good. Practically, it's probably not so good. Okay. The big issue I want to highlight is the problem we are now having with equalities. Now, 5 or 10 years ago, I'd have said that the equalities structure in the UK is great. We have the European Human Rights Act, we have a UK Act that is very similar, it's almost the same. And we have really good protection around sexualities equality, around gender recognition, everything, disability, race, religion, etc., etc. And it was good. The current Conservative government has a Minister for Equalities who wants to rethink equalities. And it's very dangerous and very scary. She is a black woman who wants to undo a lot of the equality legislation in the UK and the human rights. A rethink, a review of it. It's really threatening, I think, and very scary. So, not surprisingly, there is a big argument at the moment, a big debate about equalities in schools. So, schools have got excellent. If you go in a school now, the screens will have Happy Pride Month, LGBT equality, here's our policy, here's our classroom. Every Thursday we have a lunch group, proper inclusivity. They'll also, they'll have lots of things like that happening visually around the school, teachers wearing the lanyards that I have at the university, the rainbow lanyards, etc. Lots of good progress. But we've now got this pushback on inclusivity in RSE. So my view as a researcher is that some schools are there and some schools are not quite. And it's probably the individual teacher who isn't comfortable talking about, well, possibly not comfortable talking about sexuality, possibly not comfortable talking about LGBT plus issues. So possibly it falls a little bit short of what we want. But generally it was good. It's good in some places. In other places, schools have been silenced or are fearful of the views of parents, and they are starting to roll back their discussion of LGBT relationships. So we've got a popular right-wing resurgence in the UK, much like in many other European countries. It's wide and vocal. It's not necessarily big, but it is very vocal, and it can be powerful. And there are two examples of what's happening that I want to tell you about. And if you know J.K. Rowling's profile, then you'll understand some of that political debate. So the culture wars we are having now are about whether the sex education curriculums that schools are delivering is age appropriate. Now, I feel like banging my head against a wall. Again, mañana. I mean, encore. It's we had this debate 20 and 30 years ago. We wrote curricula that are age appropriate. I have a beautiful one from 5-year-olds. And with a 5-year-old, we will talk about a mummy cat having met a daddy cat before she could have those kittens. That's how explicit it is. So it's nothing scary and it's properly age appropriate. But the right-wing tabloids get really excited about sex education for 5-year-olds, okay? And they think it's sexually explicit, and they think it's, adults teaching about their sexual preferences and all kinds of inappropriate things. We know it's not. Anyway, so the two panics are about age appropriate, which functions to dampen it all down, and the panic that that schools are letting children choose their gender, that there's a gender free-for-all, and 90% of the children are swapping genders and even getting hormones for it. That's the panic. Of course it's not true. Of course the numbers are much smaller. The safeguarding issues for a minority are real, for a minority. Schools need support here, and schools are waiting for a policy document, a guidance document. They're waiting, and I've just taken part in a consultation for it, and I had to decide whether I thought it was more powerful to write as a professor of youth or as a parent. And that's quite interesting, isn't it? Given that I've got relevant research. Actually, I don't think my parental voice should be important, but I was thinking it would probably be louder in the debate if I just talked about as a parent. Okay, so we've got this. This is just an example of the tabloid panics. This is not somewhere I work. Sorry, this is an old article, but from The Guardian. But the tabloid panic is schools letting children run riot and choose their gender. Okay. And what it moves us to is an argument about the rights of parents versus the rights of children, which is really unhelpful too. We know that children have the right to consider and to think about and to explore their gender, and we want to protect that. We've got some great projects like the No Outsiders project that did that. And that schools can keep confidential conversations they have with children. A third aspect is that schools sometimes need to safeguard or to protect children from their parents. So they have to have it's a very separate role, and it's important that it's an independent role. On the other side, parents are arguing that they have the right to know. It's true that health professionals, like the school nurse, so health professionals can keep the confidentiality around children's health access because they are patients with the right to privacy, just like any other patients. And school nurses, my research found that school nurses are very good at knowing when to keep confidential and when they need to act to safeguard. And that includes then disclosing to the head teacher. But normally, there is no need for any disclosure to the head teacher or rest of the staff. My research found that school nurses were very clear about that, about the right to confidentiality for children and young people. Teachers were really unclear. They didn't understand that they could keep confidential something that a pupil had shared with them. They didn't understand that. Okay, so the second fight at the moment, this one about inclusive RSE, we are seeing some excellent, some of the publicity a month ago was for fairy tales that are written non-heteronormative, non-white heroes, so non-ethnocentric, and with same-sex couples, with gay princes, so non-normative fairy tales being read to, and another scandal, a separate scandal about ordinary fairy tales being read by trans actors, performers. And there was a big There were small demonstrations. It's a big argument, but they are small demonstrations. Small demonstrations of parents against this, just story reading, nothing explicit, nothing anti-equalities, nothing illegal in these stories, but a big eruption of repression of this. So I've been one of the people there've been organised representation by queer groups to resist this and to argue for an inclusive education. So this is a fight in the UK at the moment for inclusive RSE. Right, shall I wrap up? Am I being a bit too long? Okay. Yeah. So I think we're at an equalities regression point, or some of the equalities that we felt we were okay on now are being eroded and are being challenged. Same with we see this similar with discussions about abortion, where now we have termination of pregnancy, where now we have Northern Ireland has a better policy situation than the rest of the UK, which is remarkable to me. Yeah. Okay. I can finish there, and I'm really happy to. You can hear how much the politics of this exercise me. I'm very happy to link that more to my research if you want. But that's an overview, and I can stop there.